very lucky zebra. The cats didn't find him last night. Lovely yellow flowers just in front of the zebra, the flowers of the senna plant, the monkey pod. Oh, they're sparring.
They're about to get going.
A little bit of displacement activity there. Mark in Seattle, good morning to you, or should I say good evening. Well, Seattle is probably early morning. Mark is asking, apart from drought and fire, what other natural disasters or other natural threats are there to the animals of the Sabi Sands? Drought and fire. I'd say the others would be disease, Mark. Disease, something like anthrax. If the bovine TB were to mutate somehow. But yes, I'd say the only other thing would be fire. And then, of course, habitat destruction, human pressure. Fortunately, the Sabi Sand has been declared a private game reserve, so it's not likely that anything will happen to it in the future, but certainly the land outside the Sabi Sand, some of the buffer zones around the Sabi Sand will be under threat, with burgeoning human populations requiring farmland and firewood and resources. I think let's keep going. I want to see if I can find some more signs of these earlies. Why do its muscles jiggle like that, like a horse twitching its muscles? I guess, I don't know, I think it's for flies. I'd have to ask a horse person. Good question. That question came from Tara in South Africa. Twitching muscles, flexing muscles, like a bodybuilder on a stage. Bye-bye, Mr. Zebra. Take care. Hope you find some mares. Let's see what there is to find out here this morning. I want to go pull up on Ellie tracks. The lion are not too far from us. They're just up here on Rebecca's Road. We go through the dip on my right. I'd say it's about 100 yards, if that, to where the lion are lying up. A little boy and a little girl impala. So you two being naughty. There's a big ram. I wonder why there's a young female here. Unless most of the herd is here and this is the ram from the herd, but then there wouldn't be this little boy. Something moving in there. Possibly that young female split from the herd at some point, and being a social animal, her chances of survival are best if she's with others. She's probably one of the youngsters from last year, so she's not in breeding age yet, so I suppose she's fairly safe with the bachelors. Senna flowers. Thought I saw something like a mantis, but it wasn't. It was a leaf. It was a leaf disguised as a praying mantis. Normally you get it the other way around. Now, these are the elephant tracks from last night. Now, I know that because we saw them here, heard them here, and a lot of cars have been over them. The tracks, not the elephants. And this little marula tree is a green woodhopoo by the looks of things. Two of them, three of them, four of them flying away. Next time perhaps. Always a difficult thing to get the green hoodoopoos on camera, to get them to sit still. Hello squirrel. Quite a remarkable termite mound where the squirrel just ran. The way it's growing, using the support of the tree. Now it's not a threat to the tree at all. Termites only really eat dead wood, so while they might eat the bark and the side of the tree, the old bark, generally they'll leave the bush willow alone. The bush willow will grow out of the termite mound and probably benefit from the moisture and the heat. Here's that little squirrel. Hello child. And if it's possible for it to scratch it open and eat some termites. I have seen squirrels do that. Although they wouldn't eat many, I don't think. Must be well over 6 feet tall, that termite mound. In Wisconsin, interesting question. Once watching Wild Earth many years ago on Pete's Pond, I think it was in Mashatu, Julie says she saw some people on horseback. Surely this would be a dangerous thing to do where horses look just like prey animals, and how do the lodges allow this? But really, Pete's Pond in Mashatu is in Botswana. It's several hundred miles from here. I don't think the Sabi Sand would allow horseback safaris. I think the bush is a little bit thick here. But there are horseback safaris in the Okavango. There are other parts of Botswana and up in Kenya, and the lodge I was running up. In fact, it's the same lodge Scott was at. Beautiful camp in the Chulu Hills in southeastern Kenya. We had horses and people went out on horseback safaris. I think to start with, the horses have to be conditioned to be able to ride amongst wild animals, especially lion, because lion are going to be the main predator that's likely to do anything to horses. And with different terrain, with different dynamics than what those that occur here in the Sabi. So the horses, it works. The riders, the horses are very well aware. They stay together in groups. The fact that there are humans on the horses does make a large difference, because lions are not that, well, rather afraid of humans, and it's easy to intimidate them. But I'd say that here in the Sabi Sand, it's a little bit too dense, it's a little bit too thick, the bush. I don't know if anybody ever has done horseback safaris here. Of course, back in the days before Land Rovers, there was a lot of horseback. Well, everybody did everything on horseback and horse carriages. Not that it was a safari industry, but it just had people from Mozambique coming in through into the interior would ride horseback. And yes, people were taken. There were stories of lions, even black mambas chasing horse riders for whatever reason. Philadelphia, Jan was asking if the big termite mounds we've been passing, particularly that one that we've just seen now, wanting to know if they're still active. That one was, Jan. I think I'd have to regard each one on merit rather than just give you a general answer yes, because it depends which one we're looking at. Some of them are, some of them aren't. I'll be able to point out to you which ones are still active, which ones aren't. Quite easy to see, really. That one had some very fresh workings on it. The patina, the texture of it showed that it was very recent work that was done, closing it up for the colder months. Oh, look, some warthog. Sadly, they're trotting off. I'm going to stop just to let them relax. They were down at the water's edge. 3 different sizes. Cindy wanting to know if it was unusual to see that termite mound we've just seen growing inside the tree like that, because aren't they usually freestanding? A little bit of both, Cindy. Hello everybody. A little bit of both. Sometimes termite mounds are so old you actually get trees growing out of the termite mounds, because you'll find that after a couple of hundred years, when the mound is very, very big, things like baboons, monkeys, as well as some of the fruit-eating birds will sit on top of the termite mounds as vantage points, and they'll defecate and they will leave seed that can eventually start growing. And one of the reasons why sometimes on a termite mound you find what we call a tree community, certain tree species that do fruit all growing together, that invariably are the result of a baboon leaving his dung behind after sitting on it. But no, not that unusual. And yes, some of the big ones are freestanding. There's one up ahead of us, not a very tall mound, but that is because it's possible that the pinnacle itself had broken off sometime in the past. But you can see the integrity of the termite mound is still solid. There are no holes in it. There is no access for an ant or a spider or a snake or a lizard or a mouse or anything larger. And that, not only that, but it's also the temperature within a termite mound is so critical, and especially going into the colder months now, you're going to find that the termites are going to be very temperature conscious, closing up all of the, shame he ran away, very big warthog boar. Looks like a boar with 2 others. Yeah, you can see the very large wart protrusions just below the eye, and he's got 2 more on the snout. The males have 4 of them, the females only have 2. Very big boar, this, quite worn tusks. And I'm sure somewhere in our travels today, this morning, we'll be able to see a termite mound that is no longer active, and you'll see how much different it is, and invariably inhabited by so many other things that ordinarily would eat termites. That I can just stand next to or be with. Darlene in Albany in Oregon was asking a question. Now, just before I get to your question, Darlene, just to notice on this one, you can see the difference in texture. You can see the old smooth mound where the rain and the wind and animals have smoothed it off, and then all of the new work coming down the right hand side into the pinnacle itself. Still very, very rough, the very, very rough texture of it, and this would have all been done this summer. And this is known as the pinnacle mound termite, also known as Macrotermes, which is its scientific name, Macrotermes natalensis. And Dali was asking, are the termites, these termites, the same as the termites you get in North America that eat wood and damage houses? Termites in the same sense that they're termites, yes, Darlie. Maybe not the same, well, not maybe not. They're definitely not the same species. You do get so many different types of termites. In fact, probably the majority of the termite species that you do get don't make a mound. They live just within the dead wood, as would be the termites that you would have in North America. Now, I'm not too sure how closely related they are, because we would have termite that live in the wood here, a small termite that is probably the same family as the termites that you might find in the homes up on your continent. But I'm not too sure of how closely related they would be. Dali was asking, how do they start? How does the termite mound start? Well, if you look at the termite colony as instead of seeing them as separate entities, all the different types of termites, or rather shapes and castes of this one species of termite, because although there's only one type of termite, there are different castes, different body styles that are created. You get the workers that are just basic shaped termites, and you get what we call the soldiers. They've got much enlarged heads with very, very big chelicerae, very big fangs, I guess not fangs, but mouth parts for biting. And then of course there's the queen, who's the reproductive, and she's just constantly producing eggs. Now, if you look at the termite colony itself as an entire organism, where the termite mound is the body, and if there's a breach in the termite colony, if there's a breach in the mound, you will find that the soldier will come to the aid of, or rather come to the protection of that breach, whilst the workers close it up. And it's almost like the white blood cells and the red blood cells. And if you look at the arteries and veins that carry the workers around the interior of the termite mound, it is almost like a circulatory system to some degree, constantly taking nutrients and passing on nutrients to one another and securing the mound. The reproductive system, however, is a rather unique thing for a termite colony, because they will breed specific individuals or a specific caste that become reproductives. Now let me talk about it while we're driving, because this is a really lovely example. The reproductives differ to all the workers and the soldiers in that the workers and the soldiers are gifted only with a digestive system, and their function in nature is to break down the cellulose of plant cells, and to break down the hard dry plant matter into smaller components so that it can be returned to the soil as nutrients to feed new trees, to feed grasses, to continue the cycle of life, because there isn't really anything in nature that can break down cellulose. So to be able to do their job efficiently, they don't need, their bodies don't have a reproductive system. So all the space can be taken up and all of their time can be utilized by breaking down plant matter and performing that function. But every now and then they do need to reproduce, the termites. So they will breed a reproductive caste which has predominantly a reproductive system with a very, very reduced digestive system that allows those reproductives to start a new mound. At a certain time of the year, after certain rains and thunderstorms, suddenly these termite mounds will all open up and they will all eventually release their reproductives all at the same time. Just want to pause there because I'm passing, there's another little mound starting underneath here. One broken one that's probably been kicked by an animal, and one that's just underneath this beautiful wattle tree. This is an African wattle, or the weeping wattle, with that worry growing in it, and a jackalberry, baby jackalberry. Now that is actually the black mound termite. That's a different species of termite. That's known as Trinervitermes, or the snouted termite. It's much smaller than those macrotermes, and those mounds don't get very big. It just becomes a small round mound, and they live in a much smaller, tighter community. Right. There you can see a baby jackalberry in the middle of your screen now. Probably a good 20 years old already, and it's maybe 5 feet tall. So these reproductive termites now, on a very specific day of the year, that triggers the release of the reproductives. In fact, the workers and the whole colony prepare for it by opening chimneys all around the mound these little launch pads, and then after a very particular rainfall and after a particular thunderstorm, there'll be some trigger, and it is usually thunder, in my opinion. All of the same species will release their winged termites, and the reproductives have wings, but they have wings only to fly once. And they need to launch themselves off of these little chimneys that have been built, and they can fly whether it's a few yards or a few hundred yards. They fly off and they will land. The female gives off a very strong pheromone to attract the male, and as soon as that happens, they shed their wings. It's almost like they shrug. It's like shrugging off a backpack. They shrug off their wings. Their wings have these little seams that break just after they've flown, and since they don't need them anymore because they're going to be burrowing underground, they then burrow and they start a new colony, and that's how it starts. And it'll take 10 years before it gets to anything like the size of a football. Warming up a little bit now because the sun's coming out. Interesting question. Very interesting question. Ginny in Wisconsin was asking, is there a reason why it's built in a very tall pinnacle fashion as opposed to sort of horizontally? And yes, still it is. Very, very definite reason. As I mentioned earlier, there's a very, very critical temperature at which termites operate. It's much like our bodies. We get hotter or colder, we'd be sick. And I think it's about 97 or 37 degrees Celsius, which is probably about 97, 98 degrees Fahrenheit, is the optimal temperature for termites. And the pinnacle itself offers a larger surface area. If you can look at my finger, the larger surface area when the sun isn't at its coolest, striking the larger surface area in the morning and in the afternoon, and then in the heat of the day when it is really, really hot, for the sun to be shining on the smallest surface area because it's shining down onto the pinnacle itself. And you will find that some places, extreme south, termite mounds will actually point a little bit to the north. I think in Australia there's a compass mound termite because all the mounds lean in a very specific direction. So I'm going to sneak around the top of the lodge and Gallagher camp and have a look to see if I can find some signs of these ellies. Meanwhile, I'm going to cross over to Scott and see what Scott's up to on another part of Djuma, and I'll see you in a little while. So enjoy, and I'll see you shortly.
Welcome back, everyone. And as you can see, there's quite a unique relationship we have here, and that is, well, as you can see, they're still working one another out. Well, I'm glad you cut to us when you did, because we've been watching this heron sit on the hippo's back for about 15 minutes, and it was just yesterday that we were chatting about the likelihood of herons sitting on hippos' backs, as one of our viewers has noted that fairly often at the Djuma waterhole cam, very close to where Mark is now, they have seen a heron that often sits on the back of a hippo, and it's not only the heron at Djuma Dam that does that. Having an informative time with Mark, and also seeing quite a few different animals: zebra, impala, squirrels, warthog, and even discussing the lifestyle of the termites, which make these massive mounds that we see all around here. And Mark really is a wizard when it comes to the creepy crawlies, so I'm sure you got a great idea of the interesting life that termites lead. Now, it's not very hot, large likelihood that a lot of animals will be coming to the waterhole at this stage of the day. It tends to be a midday venue, so in the hotter hours of the day the animals like to come down and drink. Like I say, we've been here for about 15 minutes and we've only seen the hippo and the heron. There are a few hornbills that have been jumping around the edge of the waterhole, and it's a common place to find them because they actively seek out termites which start feeding on the decaying droppings that lie around the dam, and there's a lot of droppings that lie around the dam. So this provides a good food source for the hornbills. But I can't see any now, and that's why VM's not attempting to show you any. You'll notice from the ripples on the water that it's fairly windy, and there have been a few tiny little patches of blue sky, but it's predominantly cloudy so far today, which is great. Yesterday afternoon it was 32 degrees Celsius, which is around 90 degrees Fahrenheit, I think. So it was a really hot day yesterday, and hopefully today will be cooler. The cooler it is, the more likely predators will move. Said that though, you've all seen the sleepy lions that Mark's been with, and it's not because they're extreme.
It is indeed. That's sad. Hello, hello. Welcome back to Djuma. We're on the little road that runs to the north of Uyatela Lodge and north of Gallagher Camp, and I'm going to take Gallagher shortcut up onto Vickles Cut Line and then come back down Aubrey's Road. It is an area where there is quite a bit of elephant traffic. So far I haven't found any of the tracks yet, but I'm really hoping, I wasn't really expecting to find any tracks here, not from the ones I saw this morning. Oh, hippo tracks, fresh hippo dung. That would have been during the night. Hippo must have been walking around in this part grazing. Hippos tend to cover quite a lot of ground going into the dry season, because they do need quite a lot of grass to keep them going. And the drier it gets, hippo tracks now coming down. Gallagher shortcut must have been coming from maybe the very big dam on Buffelshoek, Sydney's dam, coming towards Gari Dam, maybe Treehouse. But hippos to move up to 30 kilometers even in the night. Got some new viewers. Welcome to Djuma Game Reserve. Welcome to our live drive. This is quite an amazing opportunity for us to interact with each other, no matter where you are in the world. And while it might be new for you, it's something that we've been perfecting over the years, and it is a rather amazing opportunity to be able to present live wildlife, but still be able to get questions from you. You can send questions to our final control, our control room. And the address is questions@wildearth.tv. That's the email address. If you want to do it in a quick old fashion and the modern technology that we have, social media, you can tweet. Hashtag Safari Live is the tweet. Safari Live, one word, lowercase. And those questions get sent to us over the radio, so I'll be able to answer those questions if you have any. Feel free to include where you come from as well. It'd be nice to know where you live, which part of the world you're in. And hopefully if you're a new viewer, you're a long time. You're going to be a long time viewer. Nice to have people come aboard and get involved. We have a lot of animals that we see on a fairly regular basis because they are territorial animals, things like lion and leopard, that we become quite familiar with, in that we follow their lives, we follow their children, we follow their day-to-day struggle for survival. But also we get a lot of animals that move through the area seasonally, and sometimes animals we haven't seen for some time. Sometimes we're surprised with something we haven't seen in a while. And while sometimes we're driving around and it looks like there's nothing out there, that's because this type of bushveld, as you can see, it's quite dense. It's not filled with animals. There are a lot. You just have to see the amount of animal tracks in the road that occur over time. You'll know that there are a lot of animals around. It's just that they're not always just standing around waiting to be seen, and it takes time to find them. It takes a bit of effort. Sometimes we need to follow tracks. We need to listen for sounds. We need to read with all of our senses: smell, hearing, sight. Gary's had a question from Arkansas, and Gary wants to know about wild dog. We saw some wild dog just before I went on leave. There's a pack of wild dogs, a couple of the older individuals. There's one really old dog whose ears are very floppy, and then there's another older dog who's starting to get floppy ears. Gary wants to know if it's a genetic trait or a sign of inbreeding. As far as I'm aware, Gary wants to know how common it is. I don't know, it's not really that common. I haven't seen it in dogs, but I think it's just an age thing. I think it's just the cartilage is collapsed through age more than anything else, more than genetic. I don't know those dogs, or rather I haven't followed those dogs for their lives, so I don't know whether those dogs were born with ears that flopped over like that, but my guess is that it's only because they're getting on in years. One of the characteristics of dogs is their big upright ears. Just to show you quickly, to conclude our talk about termites and termitaria. This is a termitarium that is long gone, it's long dead. As you can see there, it was also growing around a tree. There's a bush willow out the back of it, and this is roundleaf teak coming out of the sides of it. But it's lost that outer crust, the protective crust, and it allows us to get a view of the tunnels that exist within the colony for ferrying nutrients and things up and down, for maintaining temperature. And of course, once those are exposed, I've just seen there's a gecko on it right now that came out of one of the holes. There's a little dwarf gecko just the bottom of that stick. Yeah, somewhere down there. There you go. There's a hole almost in the front, in the middle of your screen, and just below that hole is a little Cape dwarf gecko that we know is Ligodactylus. And they're a diurnal gecko. Being a dwarf gecko, they compete with the much larger sized other geckos that we get. In fact, one of the biggest geckos is a Bibron's thick-toed gecko. So just try and turn this down.
Sorry, come again?
So with those holes, anything can get in there and eat the termite. The termites are long gone. But yes, I was saying that since that gecko has so much competition from the likes of the Bibron's thick-toed gecko, there's the Wahlberg's velvety gecko, there's the tree gecko, the tropical house gecko. I think those are the main species of geckos, nocturnal geckos that we get. They're all so much bigger than these dwarf geckos. One of the reasons why the dwarf gecko has found a diurnal existence a lot less competitive. The only competitors would be the skinks and the lizards, and of course they're mostly ground dwelling, and the dwarf geckos are predominantly tree dwellers. Sadly, of course, they then have a greater number of predators in the form of snakes, spotted bush snakes particularly, variegated bush snakes, tree snakes, vine snakes, worm snakes, baby mambas. No sign of elephant yet. Some of them had golden eyes, some of them had blue eyes. I don't know. We're going to go back there, must have a look. Is it genetic or is it because they're younger? I'm not a leopard to have blue eyes. I'm not a lion. Must go back and have a look at that, Mary, before I can answer your question. But we're heading back. We're on Aubrey's Road now. We are going to be heading back towards those cats via Zoe's Road. Here, some old elephant tracks scratching in the sand, but nothing fresh. Well, maybe we bump into some ellies on the way, but I'm feeling like I'm cold on the trail here. Back to Wisconsin. Hello, Gilly. Gilly's saying that the idea of lion that they grew up with in North America is there's a male who takes care of the pride, and the females go out hunting and raise the cubs. Sometimes the male babysits the cubs, but the typical, there's a single male lion and then the females. Gilly, it's not entirely wrong, and it is. I've had my fair share of a single male lion taking care of the territories within a pride of lion, yes, it happens, but it's not the how to explain it. It doesn't go for every single lion pride everywhere. Try and think of a way to answer this. It's a yes and no thing. Because yes, there is a male, and sometimes it's more than one male, and sometimes it's a coalition of anything up to 5 or 6. There have been bigger coalitions of males. And yes, the females are the ones that go out hunting, but the males also join in the hunt. There are often times when the males hunt with the females, especially when they're taking down giraffe and buffalo and some of the bigger animals. But the male isn't always with the pride, and quite often the pride leave the males to do their own thing, go and mark their territories and patrol their boundaries and intimidate other lions elsewhere. But the male doesn't stay with the pride forever. Now, if we look at the age of lion, I suppose you could say 2 to 3 years old, they start going through puberty, and then from about 3, their adolescence, teenage years, 3 to 5 years, and then by 5 years old, the male will be big enough, I'd say, at about 5 to start considering challenging for territory. By the time a male is 8 to 10 years old, he's already starting to lose his ability to defend that territory, and so it comes to a time where he gets ousted. So there's only a period of maybe anywhere from 3 to 5 years that males can hold the territory. And then we look at the age of lion, 10, 15 years that lion can live for. And so it's within a pride of lion, you're going to have a succession of males within the lifespan of one single lioness. There are going to be more than one male or more. There's going to be a turnover of males that will come in and dominate that pride over time. So you won't find that the male stays there forever. So we're going to cross over to Scott while I'm heading back towards those lions. We can go and have a look at their eyes. I think Scott might be heading somewhere else too. That's interesting. So we'll cross over to Scott, and I'll see you before the end of the drive when I get closer to where the cats are.
Welcome back, everyone. And you've joined us at a good time. We're about to stop in at the hyena den site. Now, it'll be interesting to see if it's active or not. The lion are probably a quarter of a mile away from the den, and I know Mark is on his way back there now to the lions, so it'll be interesting to see what they're up to. Interestingly enough, also in this area, I've just spotted a buffalo. It's a big male. I'm wondering if he's not heading in the general direction of those lions. It'll be interesting to see if something happened. He's still quite far away though, but heading in their general direction. Hard to say how long it would take for this bull to reach the lion, because they can move quite slowly. I'm just going to try and find a little gap here. It's a very difficult quarry for lions to bring down, but they are certainly capable of doing it. You'll notice there's a lot of oxpeckers, like we saw earlier, again feeding on the ectoparasites. Penny's asked an interesting question. Morning, Penny. Penny would like to know if these birds will pick up Lyme disease from feeding on the ticks off the buffalo. And no, they won't. They actually Lyme disease does not occur in Africa. It's a tick-borne disease found in America and a few other countries, I think. I'm not entirely sure, but we don't get Lyme disease here. You can see the tick digging in the nostril of that buffalo. He's surprisingly tolerant. As usually when they do get into the areas around the ear and the nostrils, the buffalo will shake their head to get rid of them. But this buffalo is obviously aware of the great help that these birds provide them with, as ticklish and, I guess, intrusive as it may be. They're doing a very important job while he sits or stands here chewing the cud. And at the rate that he's not moving, he's got nothing to worry about just yet in terms of bumping into the sleepy Nkuhuma pride. It'll be interesting to see if they are still asleep when Mark gets there. It's an overcast day, so the heat is not a factor that would prevent them from moving. And again, I'm surprised at what a small distance they have covered in the last 48 hours. They've hardly moved. Very, very small distances relative to what lions can and usually do cover. What the reasons could be, we're not too sure. Possibly movements of other lions in the area. They have been vocalizing, though. We heard them vocalize this morning, and that helped Mark to find them. He got an idea of where they were. And the fact that they're vocalizing obviously means they're giving away their position. So I don't think they're necessarily hiding from other lion, but who knows, maybe hippo is just harder to digest than other meals. That's what VM suggested to me, and they're just taking some time processing all that hippo meat. Anyway, here we've got a very interesting little home. You see it dangling there, VM, blowing in the wind?
Negative.
If you just zoom in past my...
okay, got it.
Yeah. Now, at a glance, you could easily drive past something like this. But on closer inspection, you'll notice that a very, very crafty insect called a bagworm has built this home. And using little twigs, it's placed them all parallel to one another. And within that outer casing of little sticks is the home that it will live in. Really, really interesting. And hope nobody's in there at the moment. It could be an active bagworm, or it could have already hatched out of there and metamorphosized to the next stage of its life. But if there was something in there, it's going to be very dizzy after a windy day like this. So, an example of the smaller critters and creatures that are so easy to drive past when searching for bigger animals. And there is just so much going on here that may not be easily apparent to us. Oh wow, look what we have here. Here's another interesting one. I'm not sure what's going on here, but I'm going to get out and hold that branch still so that VM can focus on it. The wind's not making life easy. That's a really, really interesting looking caterpillar. And look at those incredible markings. I think what's going on here is that this caterpillar is actually I'm not too sure what's going on actually. It could be laying eggs here within this foamy substance that you can see between itself and the stick. But again, so much going on here, so many small interesting things that are easy to drive past. Thankfully this one was quite easy to spot. So, we're just a few seconds away from finding out whether the hyena den site is in fact active. The cubs will always be there within the termite mound, the old termite mound, that there are burrows, a network of burrows in that they can hide in. So they're always there, but if the adults aren't present, the cubs tend to bunker down within the burrows. Be in luck. It's not looking too promising at this stage. What could have happened is that the adults may have already come back in the earlier hours of the morning, nursed the cubs, and then gone off to lie somewhere peaceful and relaxing where they will not get pestered by the cubs. Or it could simply be that they are still out, lying below a marula tree, looking up at a leopard with a kill, or still searching for food, possibly hunting on their own. What we do know, though, is that they are not here. Not a problem, though, because everything happens for a reason, and by not being here, it increases our chances of finding something else on this very large playground that we get to explore daily. I'm sure Mark won't be too much longer until he gets to the lions, and I'm really interested to know what's going on there. In Arizona, good morning, and thanks for sending your question through. Catherine would like to know if hyena den sites, the burrows in the termite mounds, ever flood during the rainy season. And yes, there certainly is a chance of that happening, but they do have backup plans. They don't only use one den site, they've got a host of different den sites in the surrounding area. Their closest one from here that they were last at's probably 3/4 of a mile away. So if one were to flood, they could always move to another, but they are typically designed on higher ground, and it's not common for the mounds to flood. Not that I've seen, not in this area. So this buffalo has made a wise move and not headed any closer to the lions. If anything, he's stopped in his tracks, and that's going to provide us with a great opportunity to show you some close-ups of these beautiful red-billed oxpeckers. and they're taking some time to do some maintenance. One's scraping its beak on the horns, others are preening their feathers. It looks like one's just hiding away from the wind, trying to keep warm, the one closest to its horns now. Like that. So clearly size doesn't matter if you're an oxpecker. It's who you know, not what you know, and they are on the right side of this buffalo, and it's a good place to be. They can be cantankerous and very short-tempered animals, even though here he doesn't seem to be paying much attention to us. That's because they've become used to the vehicles and understand that the vehicles don't pose a threat to them. On foot, however, they've got a very different idea of us as humans, and will either run off in fright or attack if they feel that that is their only option to defend themselves from us. On the center of its head appeared to be the most dented and broken, and that certainly is the case. And you're right, Fiona, it is from battles with other buffaloes. They will charge into one another head first, and with an animal with as much power as they have, they occasionally lose some of this keratin casing. It's a combination of that and them actually adorning their horns. You'll notice some brown, yellowy brown coloration in and amongst the horns. That's from the buffaloes rubbing their horns into trees and leaves to keep them polished and in a good condition. And that could, I guess, also slowly break down and rub off the horn, but the majority of the chunks you see missing are certainly from battles. Now we got a question a little bit earlier on from Sharon, and that's all the way from Austria. Good morning, Sharon. I hope you're still with us. Sharon asked a question incorporating both buffaloes' horns as well as tortoises and their shells. Sharon's aware of an insect called a horned borer moth, and this horned borer moth attacks keratin. It feeds on keratin. It's one of the very few animals out here that can actually feed on and process keratin. Sorry, I just heard a strange noise ahead of me. I just want to continue to listen for a second. I'll be back with you now, Sharon. It's difficult in this windy weather to pinpoint where the noise came from and actually what it was. There's so much ambient rustling. Anyway, sorry, back to Sharon's question. The horned borer moth, Sharon said that she's observed the older bulls sometimes having the effects of this horned borer moth on them while they're still alive. And Sharon, that's not the case. I'm not sure what you would have seen. The horned borer moth can only feed on and attack keratin once the animal has died. Now, the reasonings for that would probably be because the buffalo do permanently adorn their horn almost on a daily process. It's a daily process where they'll rub off any insects that would be trying to bore into their horns. It's therefore only on dead carcasses or old horns where we find these funny tubular cases sticking out almost like dreadlocks, you could say, from that surrounds the bony shell is very, very thin on tortoises, and VM's going to show you here now. On this tortoise shell, you can see there's a very thin flake. It's paper thin, so there's not enough keratin for the horned borer moth to feed on. On the buffalo's horns though, and on impala horns and various different antelopes, there's often about a 3 or 4 millimeter chunk of keratin before you get to the bone, and that's what makes horns preferable to the keratin sheathing on a tortoise shell. And again, it's only on dead animals that these horned borer moths can feed on. The living animals are too active, use their horns too much for the little insects to break down their horn, and it just goes to show how the horned borer moths have adapted to only break down that keratin and get it back into the nutrient cycle once the animal's finished using them. So it's got no impact on the living animals, only on breaking down and decomposing those horns, which is so important. So if animals were only growing and not being broken down to get back into the nutrient cycle, there would obviously be an imbalance in nutrients, and there wouldn't be enough to sustain future growth. Just got a question through from Jilly in Milwaukee. And Jilly's interested to know whether the hyena den that we've just been to is not actually, that the hyena have not actually moved to another one of their den sites. It is possible. We can go and check another den site right now for you to make sure. And I should have mentioned this though earlier on my way in. I did see fresh tracks leaving and going to the hyena den sites. So there certainly are hyenas still moving there. Fresh tracks. So I'm not convinced that they've moved, but it's certainly worth double checking. There's a chance that that may have happened. If there were no fresh tracks there, I would certainly think it's a high chance. But things that are making me lean towards them not moving is that they've only moved back to this current den about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. Therefore, it's unlikely that they would move already. They usually spend a month or two at least at any given den before moving. There's some good news, folks. Mark has made it back to the Nkuhuma Pride, and I'm sure you're interested to know what they're up to. So over to Mark, and we will catch up with you a little bit later.
That if they needed to react to it, they could have done so without drawing too much attention to themselves. So they clearly have now closer together, but clearly lying closer together means that if they were to all sit up at once, they're likely to be seen a lot easier than if they were sitting in separate places. The only one off to himself is the young male. But other than that, they look like they're pretty much set in for the day. Largest number of males in a coalition that I've ever seen. There's a question from John in California. Morning, John. 7 young males in one coalition is my largest number. I know there have been, I think there was a group of 12 here once where they broke up into 8 and 4, and then the 8 broke up to be 6. Can't remember who they were, but the largest I've ever seen has been 7 up in the Timbavati. About 20 years ago. Marilyn wants to know how a young male like this young male would find any others to form a coalition. It seems that they're so spread out and they're so far apart that they'd wander around forever. Marilyn, vocalization is the key here. A lion roars can carry over a considerable distance. For our ears, one can only imagine that for their ears they can hear them even better. It's quite cute, that youngster holding on to the bottom part of that bush willow. They would vocalize, and that vocalizing would bring them together, and for whatever reason it may be, whether it's as a challenge initially and then are answering the calls, and those vocalizations have a lot of messages in that are a little bit too subtle for us, not being the same species, but there must be a lot that is being said and a lot that can be read in the voice and the amount of calling and the volume of the call. Oh, I'm green with envy because Scott's got something special that I've been looking for. So let's go back to Scott for some last minute excitement here on our morning sunrise safari at Djuma Game Reserve.
Welcome back. And I must say that it was Mark's efforts in initially tracking down these elephants that helped provide VM and myself with the information required to move into this area. So, thanks Mark, and I'm sure he's very jealous. For those of you who don't know Mark well, he loves elephants very deeply. And he's probably going to come here straight away to get some time with them. We've just bumped into them, and that's why I'm just giving them some time to get used to us and to establish their mood and also establish which direction they're feeding in. And only then will we try and get in and position ourselves to get you a bit of view. And I think we can just about do that now. So far I've only seen 3 elephants, the two that you could see in shot, and then a larger one beyond them, deeper into the thick vegetation. There could very well be more around. And I think that was the noise I heard earlier when we had stopped with the buffalo. I think it could have been elephants trumpeting or making some kind of a noise. This is a young lady, and you can tell that because she's got a very angular forehead, and even through this thick bush you may notice that it's kind of a 90-degree angle where the top of her head meets her forehead. The males will have a much rounder head, almost like a soccer ball, but right now you can't see too much. So again, I'm going to try and reposition. I've got an idea which way they're feeding in now, which is going to make it easier for us to try and get ahead of them and then allow them to feed on towards us. And Jilly, just to let you know, we are also en route to the hyena den site, the old one, just to make sure that it's not still active, but I'm not convinced we're going to make it there now that we've bumped into the eddies. We will, however, though, pop in there after drive, if we don't make it there during the drive, just to make sure. This is very, very interesting. This adult that you can see in picture now, she's lost the end of her trunk. Now, what would have caused that, I'm not too sure. It's slightly shorter than normal, only ever so slightly, but it's missing the prehensile little fingertips that would allow a huge animal like this to pick up something as small as a peanut. And often see the two clear nostrils. Shame, I wonder what it was that caused that. Sadly, poaching is a reality in Africa, and one of the cheapest ways of poaching is to use a wire noose, which is called a snare, and these nooses are placed on animal trails, and sadly they're indiscriminate of what they tighten onto. So even though the poacher wouldn't have been trying to catch an elephant, he could well have taken off the end of her trunk. You may notice now the little prehensile fingertips on this other elephant that we're watching. It's difficult as they're moving, but you can clearly see that the other elephant was missing that end portion of the trunk. And unless, like that one just did now for a split second, unless they point their trunk straight at you, you will seldom see each nostril. Well, we're just going to try and reposition and get ahead of these elephants, and while we do so, let's cut over to Mark and we will see you a bit later.
Quite the picture, that youngster sleeping under that log, holding onto the log. it's like hugging a pillow, bit of a hard pillow. We'll see you then this afternoon. Thanks for the questions that you sent in this morning. It was great to answer them. And I hope we can continue again later. So from myself and Brian and the Jigger and the cats, we'll see you later. Bye, everybody. Love you lots.
Welcome back, and we've decided against trying to get ahead of this herd. It's so thick around us that we don't want to be crashing through the vegetation unnecessarily. And it does appear that there are just 3 of them here. Abnormal to have such a small herd. But maybe they've only fragmented away from a larger herd recently and are just spending some time alone. It's not uncommon for animals to come and go from herds. Now, something that I forgot to mention the whole drive is that it's our fireside chat this evening. So that's something to look forward to. It's going to run for the last half an hour of the broadcast, so it's not an extra hour on top of the broadcast. We're basically going to start the fireside chats at 5:30 and it will finish at 6. So the last half an hour of the sunset safari will be something a little different for those of you who are new. But it is a regular slot. Every Sunday evening we sit around the fire, focus on the highlights of the week and answer some of your questions. So I'm looking forward to it. I missed the last few fireside chats as we had some different presenters down for some TV broadcasts, and it's always good fun. And I know Mark loves it as well, so the 2 of us will be there. Sadly, Brent won't be with us. Up to 3 years, 4 years. Just going to try and get us there in the next few minutes to get you a view. We are nearly finished with this sunrise safari, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly love spending time out here with all of you, and every day is different. That's one of the great things about the Safari Live experience. You never know what to expect. Sure, maybe we can try to get a view, but it's going to be tricky. They're moving through such thick vegetation, but we might get lucky here. And we can now see the calf trailing its mother in hot pursuit. Let's watch the one on the left here, Vim. It looks like we're getting some action. Vim, left. Well, this young lady came trundling up to us, and she's just giving us a little bit of attitude. There's the youngster, look, begging for milk. It's hard to see because it is in the very thick vegetation. Anyway, that's all happening at the wrong time, because it is time for us to say goodbye. And from myself, Scott, thanks so much. VM, great work on camera, and to Nikki and Tara in final control. We'll see you all for the Sunset Drive a little bit later on. Have a good day.